Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and that's right, it is the first video, first of many, of Absolute Victory by Compass Games. There's the box right over there for you guys. This is going to be filmed in numerous different ways. There's going to be a combination of static cam and the handheld that I'm doing now, simply because, as you can see, the map is massive. So I'm going to have to do things like move around, move lighting around in between different shots. Times like this where I'm doing more talking, I'll probably use the handheld gyro to film certain areas. And if we're going to be zoomed into an area, like if we're here in the Pacific and we're going to be in this little spot for a little while, I'll set up a static cam and zoom it in. That way we can have a steady shot for a period of time, or when we're doing combat. This first video is just going to be an overview of the game, real like shallow overview, because this game is deep, right? It's deep, almost like a frequency wave, right? There's high and low points with this all across the board. We're going to just touch the high points as we go on with this first video, so you understand the basic concepts. And then we're going to do a playthrough series and the follow-on videos where we play through a world conflict simulation, but it's going to be different from the first one, all right? So this game does have a special place in my heart because this was the first Hex Encounter war game that I ever covered on my channel. I actually think it was the first game that I ever covered on my channel, period, was Absolute Victory. And I covered it because there were no other videos on it. And strangely enough, there really aren't now. To this day, my videos are still the main ones that come up. And they just were not good. They're not the quality that I churn out now. Now, of course, this isn't perfect right now because this is just me yapping and showing you guys the basics. But it's going to be a lot better lighting and sound and all that other good stuff. But this game does hold a special place in my heart since it was the first video, the first game that I ever covered, and I wanted to do it justice by showing it again, setting it up, but I'm not doing the original scenario that I did. Okay, so there's multiple different ways that you can play this game. It's a 3-map game, well, 4 technically if you want to use Antarctica, but a 3-map game. So we got map A, we got map B, and we got map C over here. So you can do a Victory in Europe campaign, and that's one, like so many other simulation games, where you're handling the war in Europe. Eastern Front, Western Front, all that good stuff, north part of Africa, that crap. Then you got your Pacific campaign that's going to be covered here on B. And then if you do the world conflict and you put it all together, that's when you can do stuff like actually have units invading South America or Northern America, really have the American units involved. Now, if you do the other, so if you do a war in Europe, war in Pacific, those standalone scenarios where you only have one of these maps up, America can still be involved, but there's just a off-map box that their units will be associated with rather than actually them having their country there. And that's so much better, just being able to see it, have them having to ship their units over and deal with this whole Pacific. You guys know I love the Pacific, so I'm looking forward to this part of the game. So I started with the scenario, well, technically, Scenario 3, Scenario 7, Scenario 10. The way it is in the scenario booklet, Scenario 3 starts in 42 of World War II, 1942. Scenario 7 starts in 1941, the very tail end of 1941, with the attack on Pearl Harbor. So the way this scenario works out is that you start with the November-December turn of the game, and the only units that can activate are going to be the ones here on B, the Pacific Theater, because they get one activation. They basically pull off the attack on Pearl Harbor to get that part of the war started, and then we kick off to the full world conflict portion of the game. Okay, so the game itself, let me zoom down a little bit and kind of show you a little bit closer on here. And sorry, you guys are going to see shadows, just it's the way the lighting is. There's only so much I can do to mitigate that here. It is obviously a grand strategy monster type of game. We've got our Soviet units, our German units, and you can see here they're mainly set up in the portion where they've already taken out Poland, they've already taken out France, They're down here in Northern Africa. Now, obviously, they're not exactly set up as they were during that period of the war, because you do get some agency when you're setting up the units to decide how you want to set them up for each side. There's the pro-Axis, the pro-UN, pro-Soviet, because Soviet's technically pro-UN, but can go, in either direction. They won't go pro-Axis, but they do have the option to try to have a peace treaty with Germany at some points in this game. And see, when I first got into wargaming, one of the things that I really liked about it was that thought that you can have this huge map with a grand strategy with a bunch of tiny little counters representing all the different units spread all over, and you could feel like a general, and wow, isn't that so cool? Setting it up is a little bit different. Man, this is a labor of love. I've been doing this crap for days, clipping counters, setting up units. This game takes a damn minute. It's a monster to set up, because you got to figure out which units you're pulling out, which special rules are going to apply, get all the counters set on the board, figure out all your units, then how you're going to put these units out, all these units out. Now, just to show you a unit counter here real quick, it's going to be a relatively generic unit counter. You see this obviously represents Great Britain, and it's got a couple of numbers on there. Now, the combat system in this game is relatively different from combat systems you've seen in others. I'll give you a brief overview of it here in a minute, but it involves something. It's not a CRT table like many use. It has a whole battlefield type deal that you'll go to. They call it the front, and that's where your units are going to be. And that first number on there, 2 for Great Britain, is their violence number. So effectively think of that as how many dice, focus back in, they roll when they attack. So the higher the number that is, that's better. And the second number is the fortitude, right? So that's how tough the unit it is. So the higher that number, the more hits they can take before they get damaged. Obviously, better units are going to have higher numbers. Most, from what I can see, main units, so like main forces out there, are going to be something like a 2-4, 2-3 type unit. And that's going to include tanks too. Tanks operate a little bit differently. The Soviets, they're a 1-1 or a 1-2 when they get upgraded. That kind of symbolizes them getting better equipment, better tanks later on. Your smaller forces, something like Romania, Bulgaria, or Yugoslavia, they have lower stats. You can see these are 1-2. The Italian units, there's some stacks of them here, 1-2. Kind of neat in this game in the fact that if the Italian units are stacked with German units, they get better, right? So they're 1-1 on their own, but they're 1-2 if they're stacked with a German unit. Kind of neat. But you're not just going to have infantry. You're going to have your tanks. Tanks have some special rules when it comes into combat. And then there's the option for aircraft, but aircraft are very abstracted in this game. I'll show you them here in a sec. They're on the battle card, battle player aid, the front. And they're very, very abstracted, but you basically have available as many aircraft as armies, so as many infantry and tanks that you have involved in the battle. We also obviously have sea units as well. You see a bunch of Great Britain's sea units up here, some of the crappy German sea units over here, a few Russian ones. Your big naval stuff, I mean, obviously Great Britain's got some naval stuff going on, but if we step over here, I'll show you we are prepped for Pearl Harbor. This is actually one of the special rules for this scenario, is that 8 battleships and 4 aircraft carriers have to start in this hex. And this is the striking force, which is a stack of battleships and carriers. And you can use these single counters to represent them. They're held off map in a player aid. Show you guys that here in a sec as well. They start off this turn by attacking. They do a special attack on Pearl Harbor and try to wipe out as many of those ships as possible, take out the American fleet. But the American fleet does have a few more ships over there. All right, so let's sit back down for a second and go over a few more things. This operates on what they call a pulse system, which is going to be a IGO-UGO system. And it is very in-depth on what you can do on a pulse. A pulse can be everything from drawing an event card, which is what These two booklets have to do with, and we'll get onto those again here in just a second, to movement, to initiating combat, to doing an amphibious assault, to doing an air raid, to doing naval combat. So pretty much everything that you can do that involves moving units, attacking units, moving things around on the board, that's going to be a pulse. So you can imagine how long this game takes to get a turn done, because each stack counts as a pulse. And both sides are going to go back and forth until they're done initiating pulses for their side. And your units are going to do what's called flipping in this game. So let's zoom down here so you guys can see we've got some Australian units. So if this Australian unit moved, boom, 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 and got down, let's say that was his movement and he was done for his pulse, you would flip the unit to signify that he is done. Now, that's one of the things I didn't like about this game when I first started, and I still don't like it now, is the back of the counters are blank, and you can't see. So at the end of the round, you would end up with just blank counters everywhere, and you wouldn't be able to tell what's what. Honestly, I doubt they would do the game this way now, but it's 4 or 5 years old. But I did come up with a nice little workaround that I used, and I find it works very well for me. Yes, I am bringing back out my yellow beads from when I did this game previously. So now, instead of flipping a stack of counters, I just place a little yellow bead on them. It stands out relatively nicely, letting me know that unit has activated for this round, and I don't have to worry about it. Now, sometimes you will have some units in a hex that are flipped and some that aren't. In that case, you might have to do something like this, see if you can stack it up on the bead, or flip it over, figure out some way to handle it. And then once all the units in the hex are taken care of, they're flipped, then you could take and place the bead on top, something like that. But I find this to be a much more elegant solution for me personally. So that's what you guys are going to see, is my little beads on the units when they are done. So that signifies that they've activated, just so I can see what units are there still in the hex. All right, so I want to show you guys this here real quick. This is called the front. Got my big dice tray beneath it. You're going to need a buttload of D10s and some D6s. I'm not using my double six dice. I'm using the ones my wifey actually got me these. She was nice enough. She found some Marine Corps D6s, so I thought I'd use them in this game. But I would definitely recommend getting a big handful of D10s that you can use, because there's going to be a lot of D10s used for your attacks. That's the main dice you're going to be rolling. But you're going to be using them here. This is the front. All right, this section here, this is your air committed box here. So this is where all your aircraft are kept. We got our Axis units, our UN units. The ones that are available are at the top, and the ones that are below that are considered used for the round. And then I'll show you guys where damaged aircraft, tanks, and everything go here in a sec. This is the kind of intuitive part. This is the part that's real different, because there are plenty of games out there that are hex and counter, and you're moving units around, global warfare strategy, plenty of games like that set in World War II. Most of them operate off a CRT table. This one operates off of what they call the front. And it is very much different. That's the main thing that I've taken from this game, is that everything is done differently, like trying to bring something new to the game. And I do like the system on that. It is more cumbersome though. So that's a problem, because you are constantly having to take units off the map, put them onto the front here to commit your combat, and then bring them back to the map. Of course, there is a little counter you can use to signify where your battle's taking place, but it does bring something different to the game. So real quick overview, it'll be easier when we actually get combat going to show you guys how this is going to work. Let me grab a couple of American units here real quick to show you guys. But when you start your combat, you're going to put your ground units here in the ready box. So we got Axis ready and then UN ready. When it comes to infantry units, they can only go in the boxes with the squares. So the black or the white squares, just to signify the fact that they're so large, right? So an infantry army is going to have a lot of supply personnel, just extra stuff that they have to carry, trucks, that kind of stuff. This is what that represents, just the space and manpower that they take. So you can't put infantry armies next to each other, but a tank can go next to them. All right. So the easy way to think about it is anytime you place an infantry army in one of these boxes with a square in it, they have to have the space to the right of them free. All right. But a tank doesn't. So if these were both tanks, they could be set up like that on the board. So you can have more tank armies. That's why you want to have mixed units, so you can get more units on the board. But you're going to line up your units. And it's the same way if we're using ships, tanks, whatever. The ships will go here, infantry go here, whatever. And then you're going to use a chart, which again, I'll show you guys here in a sec. Because like I said, there's no CRT. This is all done differently. And you're going to use that violence number, that first number that I was telling you guys about. For the American units, it starts at 1, goes to 2 later on. And that's how many dice they roll. And they're going to be looking to meet that required number to inflict hits on the other side. So you'll do that for both sides, find out how many hits that they receive, and then you're going to bring the units down. So you see the first says hits or shattered. Shattered means that they go to what's called a shattered unit box. And the easiest way to understand that is it's easier to bring a shattered unit back into the game than it is to bring a destroyed unit, right? To, like, if you want to, because you can recruit so many units each turn, but for like infantry, for example, you can bring back 3 shattered infantry for every 1 brand new infantry that you recruit. So that's a good thing to do. And then your extra hits, if you had like ships, they're going to go down to sunk. But you're going to have your aircraft here at the top. So if we had aircraft that were involved, they would go here. There would be an air superiority fight. That's what these boxes are. Whoever had extra aircraft left after air superiority is determined gets to use their aircraft to inflict hits on the enemy army. Sorry, my gyro keeps twisting on me. You guys will see a lot of this in the upcoming game. It is much, much more fiddly than your standard grand strategy war game is going to be. But I do like the fact that they tried to innovate it. They tried to do something different. They tried to have this front, a more realistic simulation, and the fact that your infantry take up so much space, your tanks take up less space, your aircraft, if they have superiority, then they get to contribute to the battle. Your ships can be damaged and be out of combat for X amount of turns, or they can be sunk and be just destroyed. It's a lot more intuitive than just a simple, this many units are in combat, we'll roll this many dice, you got to inflict this many hits. Okay, well, you're going to retreat or lose that many units. So it's not as quick and free-flowing as that type of game will be, but it's more realistic, I guess is a good way to put it. You guys will see more as we get real combat going on here in a few turns or a few videos. Quick rest of the components for it. Up here is our turn record track. You can see a lot of units already on the board. These are ships that will come into the game later on. The way ships work is they're not like normal units in the fact that a tank, for example, being built will just be placed on the next turn to come out. A ship goes so many turns ahead before it can be built, obviously, because it can take up to a year or two to build an aircraft carrier, so they have to be planned out. And then you'll just keep track of your game turn. Other things will be kept track of besides just that, but the basic gist is you're keeping track of your production here along with your game turns. Okay, and over here is our next portion. This is all the player aids that get involved with the game. So let's go over these very quickly to try not to take too much time. Upper left here, this is the diplomatic alignments. This is just a flag for each country that's involved in the game. Whether they're pro-Nazi, Japan, US, Soviet, pro-UN, neutral, conquered, who conquered them. So you're going to have a flag for all the different countries and then who's aligned with who. This can obviously change over the course of the game. Each of the scenarios will tell you which flag goes in which box. It does take a while to get all these set up. This is how it's starting basically at the beginning of 1942. Over here, we have our Naval Task Force, and you have these little counters. And this just works to help declutter the board. So you see, I do have a stack of Japanese naval units here already as an example. That one counter that was on the board near the Pearl Harbor attack, these are the units that that's representing. So you can do that with all the different naval fleets. You can use the single counter to represent those to make it easier to move just a single counter on the board rather than having the huge stacks. To the right of that, this is the national leadership, which can change. So we have the people you would expect right now: Hitler, Churchill, Roosevelt, Stalin, what is his name? Tojo. Yeah, Tojo. That can change with different events that happen in the game. Omnibus markers track. This has to do with how many event chits that have been drawn. We'll touch on events here in more in just a sec. And then things like strategic warfare, other minor little numbers that you have to keep track of over the game. That's what that's going to be looking at. All right, so these two boxes here, these two player aids, are the Army version of the naval fleets, okay? So these are Army groups. Same thing, just used to declutter the board. So you'll take a stack of units that are in a single hex, place them in one of these boxes, and use that counter to represent them. All your major forces are represented here. The Shattered Remnants box, this is where your broken units go. So if you have a tank that gets destroyed, infantry get destroyed, they're going to go here. And like I said, when you do production, because there is production in this game, you can bring back so many from here or build new. So it is easier, and you get more. I think it's 1 to 3, if I remember right. I'll have to look in the rules to confirm. But like you can use 1 production point to get 3 from the remnants rather than 1 brand new one. So your army's coming back up to strength is kind of what that represents versus increasing its total strength. Now over here, these two player aids are the event cards, and this has to do with all the different events that can happen in the game, and you can have these event save markers. So this means that there's an event that can be played at some point. A lot of these have to do with special events like the Pearl Harbor attack, or whether a minor neutral country is going to come in and actually join the war on someone's side, whether or not you're going to play these. Now, before we actually start playing the game, I'm going to go through each one of these events for both sides, see if there's any that can go ahead and be played out and remove these markers. That way we don't have to try to remember this during the game itself. Okay, so I know we're touching on a lot of stuff here, guys, and I'm trying to hit the highlights while letting you know as much as possible about it. Now, the two things that I was just talking about, the save event markers, have to do with these booklets. And you can think of these as like a big book of cards. So let's just open it real quick. We're not going to read the cards because I want to have them like as special events that we'll read as we go through the game so we don't know what's coming. But you notice little codes here at the top, WC 437. That means it's World Conflict, year 1943, and this is the 7th event, okay? So we're going to have a book full of these events for both sides, Axis and UN. And you're going to draw those counters as such during the course of the round. You can draw so many, I think it's 6 each side during the course of play. And then, and this is something that doesn't make sense to me, at the end of the game round, you draw the rest. So it's like there can be upwards of 45 counters in here. Are we just going to go through all of them? Now, there's not always that many, but there can be up to 15 for A, B, and then totality. So Europe, Pacific, and then world conflict. I like the event system in the fact that it does bring that that nuance to the game, the fact that these weird things did happen, and that doesn't mean they're having to generate these special rules. They can effectively be cards that are put into a booklet instead of a deck of cards, because it'd be a huge stack of cards, so the booklet is easier there. But with that, the game rules, as I understand them, are written as such that every event will be played. And that's something that doesn't make sense to me, because I think this game would play better if the events weren't a requirement. And let's say there was 15 possible events, all right, just as a random number, 15 possible events that could happen in 1941. And you got to draw 5. Well, that would change up each game to game, because then you don't know which of those 5 events is going to happen. Maybe the Pearl Harbor attack happens, or maybe it doesn't. And now, granted, the special rules in this do allow for historical variation, because I was eyeballing the Pearl Harbor attack rules, and there is the chance that the Americans gain knowledge ahead of time and they're able to thwart the attack or fight back or do multitude of different things. It depends on some dice rolls and stuff like that. So there is variation with it, but I don't understand the fact that there isn't variation with the totality of the events that can occur in the game. So you're always going to have all of the events happening. That didn't make sense to me. I'm going to read that rule again just to make sure I'm not misinterpreting it. But if I'm reading it 100% correctly, it means that you play all the events for both sides for each calendar year that you're playing. So you'll play through all the events for 1941, and 1941, and all the events for 1942 and 1942. I don't know. I think it would be better if there was that variation, but I guess they might have to have it because some things might be game dependent on this event actually occurring. Like there's some events that bring America into the war, or Germany declaring war on America, things like that. So maybe you don't want to have that randomness with it. We'll see more as we play. Because like I said, I haven't played this game in 3 years, 4 years, going on somewhere around there. It has been a while, and I was very much a amateur wargamer at the time. I am so looking forward to looking at this game with a critical eye now, especially with the knowledge that I have now versus the knowledge that I had then. All right, show you guys a couple more quick things for the overview. This is an example of one of the production charts. You guys can see, obviously, I had scanned it and printed it off. They are in the rulebook. The rulebook does suggest that you scan and print them. I would wholeheartedly concur with that because you're going to be writing all the hell over these. So make sure that you do that when it comes to this game. Quick overview of this. I like how they try to simplify the production. You have so many factories per country, like Italy here, they have 2, one in Genova, one in Milano, and you can pick what those 2 factories produce. So S is for ships, T is for tanks, P is for planes, and they can produce one of those 3 things. You'll notice that I don't say infantry because each major nation gets so many infantry per turn. And that can change. Like America, for example, gets 2 infantry per turn, and that's new infantry that are joining the game. Remember, though, they can get shattered, those damaged, destroyed units, out of that shattered remnants box at like 3-1. So they could use those 2 production points to gain 6 infantry out of the shattered remnants box as well. So neat way that production is going to work. It is different for each nation. A nation like the Soviet Union over there, they get, I think it's 9. I've got it written down somewhere so I can keep track of all of it. But it has to do with how many surrender cities they have. So if they have control of all 9, they get 9 units per turn. If they only have control of 8 of their cities, 8, 7, 6, and so on. I think Germany gets 2 or 3, and then that goes up to like 4 if they get into total war. Japan somewhere in the same. America can get up to 6 if they have German or Japanese troops on their own soil. So interesting way that the rules kind of fluctuate with that. But I do like that for the most part, you're looking at a standard amount of units that are going to be coming back each turn. Now, here's where we're going to see how kind of things play out, right? There's so much stuff that I haven't even touched on. Little things like the fact that there are atomic weapons in the game. There's a little track down here. Actually, it bumped the markers. America starts at 1 in the research, and Soviet Union, Germany, and who else is Japanese? They start at nothing, 0. So they'll build up as they go, and then you can potentially gain so many bombs that you can use to bomb the shit out of each other. There's a lot of special exception rules to this game. I had mentioned previously in a video that I was talking about this, that there are 3 rule books to this game. You've got your main rule book, which is like your big general overview. You've got your second rule book, which is basically all the exceptions to the game. And then you've got your third rule book, which has a few like specialized rules as well. And then the scenarios themselves. So far, from what I can see with my now critical eye and deeper understanding of war games, is that second rule book is either going to make or break the game, and either make or break the game for you, right? Because war gamers, like real big war gamers, if you're into the big games, like stuff like this, where it's going to take you a while to set everything up and do all that crap, if you don't mind the time that it takes to set stuff like this up, this isn't going to bother you. This is going to be up your alley. So first rule book isn't going to bother you. You're going to be up for learning something new, trying out the front, seeing a new combat method, okay? I think this game is going to come down to that second rule book and these events, right? I think that is going to determine whether or not this is a game for you. Because when it comes down to it, the move and the counters and attacking and having your hexes surrounded, because there is rules even for surrounding a hex and not crossing hex sides and retreating, garrison units, all that type of stuff. That is all in here. Forts even. Straits, different types of canals, all that good stuff. That's all in here. It's going to come down to those specialized rules, because some of them, like Pearl Harbor, I'm good with because it's a one-off, right? So you need to dig into that second rule book once. Figure out Pearl Harbor, play out Pearl Harbor, you're done with it. So you don't have to worry about it anymore. That player aid that I showed you over there, though, with all the event save markers, especially if you're playing this solitaire, when you're having to worry about, okay, well, what's the special exception for this one? And then what's the exception for this one? And what's the exception for this one? That, I think, is going to weigh on someone. There are some war gamers that are going to thrive with it. They're going to run with it. They're going to hit the ground running. And they're just going to love that. But there are some war gamers that they just want the meat and potatoes, right? So they want rulebook number 1, and that's it. They want to be done. They want to have the map set up with their counters, and they don't want to have a buttload of exceptions and variant counters and save markers and stuff like that to worry about. Because I think that is the fiddly point for this game, is having those counters spread across the map, spread across all the different player aids. We're trying to remind you of this, that, and the other. And especially for someone like me who has shit for brains and can't remember anything thanks to landmines, that's going to be a problem. I guarantee you I'm going to mess up rules on this just because there are so many. The standard rules we'll get. Combat, we might miss a die roll here or there, but I'm not talking about missing a modifier. I'm talking about missing a complete rule or a complete exception. That's going to happen, and it's going to happen just because there are so damn many, I can't keep track of all of them. All right, and just to show you, here is rule book number 2. And they even say it right here in the beginning of it, right? It's somewhere in here, I forget where it was. That basically, yep, most of these rules will only have to be consulted once or twice over the course of a game. You do not need to be committed to memory. Ones which players should be aware of are marked with a red check mark. I like that. That's cool. They've even got them marked like, okay, these are more important rules. You need to pay attention to these. But look at that. There's a lot. And they did good. They got them divided in victory in Europe, victory in Pacific, or victory over Japan, which Pacific, and then world conflict, which is all of them. So, I mean, they've done as much streamlining as possible. But this is not a game to be streamlined. This is a game to work through. This one is that labor of love where you're going to dig in and you're going to gut check through it. It's not a game for the faint-hearted, right? And I even touched on the fact that we got weather. Weather is the thing that determines how far your units can move. There's all these different areas. Let's look. We got south subtropical or subarctic and south monsoon. That's what this one is. And then we get north monsoon over here. North subtropical or subarctic, if it is temperate, Arctic up there. So we got all these different, that's what these little lines are here. That divide up the weather, right? All across the board. We hadn't even touched on weather, right? This is one of those games where I think if you've watched this video up to this point, you already know. You're either sitting there gritting your teeth and change the video already, saying, nope, not for me, I'm done. Or you're sitting there thinking, okay, yeah, I wouldn't mind giving that a shot, because what is it? What are the ones that get off to pain? A masochist or something like that? Yeah, if you're a masochist, this is the game for you. But it's nothing like that. If you're a person that's going to sit there and play a World at War and you're going to gut check through it and enjoy the shit out of that, or what is that big one that I don't have? Case Blue, right? You want to play that big one. You want to play those big games. You want to really dig your teeth into it. This might be one of those that you need to look into and see if it's something for you. And like I said, it's going to come down to that event system. If you think this sounds good and you see how I play and how the events are actually working with the game, then you're going to be like, yeah, okay, let's do the events. All right. But anyway, let's stop this here because I have rambled on for almost 40 minutes and that's more than enough to hit the highlights. What we are going to do, like I said, is we're going to pick up the start of the game. It's going to be with the Pacific here, the attack on Pearl Harbor. We're going to play through that November, December 1941 turn. See how that goes. That's only going to be map B. Just these units are going to phase. And then it's going to tick over into the January, February of 1942. With the 1941 finishing part, I'm not going to worry about any events for that. That's what all those save markers over there are for. With 1942, we're going to pick up with the events in the full portion of it. But the first part, you'll be able to see how all the pulses are going to work. So these units move around. They'll all attack each other. The Americans will probably get their asses handed to them as the Japanese roll down through here. But it'll be a good small break for you guys to see a smaller portion of the game. And then if you're into Pacific area games, you'll see if you like this portion of it. All right. But if you have any questions or concerns or things that you want to know more about, feel free to put them down in the comments. And you guys stay tuned. I will have the first one up for you soon. Y'all take care. I'll catch you in the next one.